Good evening, folks. For those of you tuning in online, we had another good meal. Again, if you want to come and join us almost every Wednesday. I know this is the first Wednesday we've been in service in a while, but almost every Wednesday. And tonight we almost wasn't here too because our Pawnee Nation is in mourning right now. Had another relative pass away, and he was a former chief, and so the whole tribe right now is affected in one way or another. To be a chief, it's a respectable position, but also along with that, he was a full blood, and so all the tribe is reminded that we're that closer to losing that blood identity, I guess, that's imposed on us, right? But he was a full blood, and so prayers to the family that's going through their tough time right now. As long as we can get through, I will be joining them because they're in wake services right now, and then the funeral services are tomorrow morning, and they'll have their feast, take care of their things, and we'll be done in the afternoon. So we're going to be at Matthew chapter 20 this evening. I'm reading out of the Holman Christian Standard. I have my trusty King James right here to help us understand what we're going to be reading, but we're just going to dive right in. So, Jesus is on the scene, Matthew chapter 20. He has already spoken to the congregation and to those around him that he's going to leave. If you guys don't know when those are, they're a couple references earlier in the book. There is one in Matthew 17, and then the first time he really reveals what's going to happen is during where's it at? It's earlier towards Matthew chapter 12. But here, he's telling of his death. He's predicting what's going to happen. He's foretelling. He's prophesizing what's going to occur. And so, picking up in verse 17, it says, "While going up to Jerusalem, Jesus took the 12 disciples aside privately and said to them on the way, 'Listen, we are going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death. Then they will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked, flogged, and crucified, and he will be resurrected on the third day.'" And this isn't the first time that they're hearing this. They've been told twice. This is the third time. They don't know how important it is. They don't know the significance of what he's trying to tell them, what he's trying to relay to them. They're going to remember later on. They're going to have that aha moment. They're going to be like, "Oh, wait, he was already telling us about this." So, verse 20, it says, "Then the mother of Zebedee's sons approached him with her sons. She knelt down to ask him for something. 'What do you want?' he asked her." And this is Jesus asking the mother. It says, "Promise," she said to him, "that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right and the other on your left, in your kingdom." 22, "But Jesus answered, 'You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?' 'We are able,' they said to him. He told them, 'You will indeed drink my cup, but to sit at my right and left is not mine to give. Instead, it belongs to those for whom it is prepared by my Father.' When the 10 disciples heard this, they became indignant with the two brothers." What does indignant mean? What does indignant mean, Gonna heal? What would be an example of it? What would be an example?
Them like almost like appalled, like they're upset with them, like they can't believe that they would ask something like that.
Like, how dare you? That would be a good way of explaining it, illustrating. What about you? Got another way? How dare you? It says, but Jesus called them over and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles dominate them, and the men of high position exercise power over them. It must not be like that among you. On the contrary, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. So, what do we got here? We got a lot of things to really go over. 3 things that I want to point out, and is really, really evident in this passage, even though it's 10 verses. There's a lot here. We have all been told about the resurrection. We've all been told, we've all been prophesied, not only about what occurred in the past, but what's about to take place. Okay? And we don't know the time. We don't know if it's the next minute, the next hour. I'm quite enjoying life right now. So even though it's chaos out there in the world, it would be kind of sudden. It'd catch me off guard if it was happening the next hour. I wouldn't be expecting it. But that's the point. What he was dropping on them, was knowledge bombs. This is already going to occur. It's a way of him conveying his authority, that this plan was already laid out and executed. You are just to obey. And that's what he was really meaning to them when he was saying, listen, we're going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death. Obey. Obey. And who was that to? Probably more than anybody else? The fighter, right? The one who's going to cut the ear off of the guardsman, the military guy that's trying to take Jesus. He's going to go in and he's going to slice his ear off. Not his whole ear, but he's going to slice it off. He's trying to let them know, obey. Obey, because it's going to turn out to be good. All this is going to look bad, but it all has a plan and there's a reason for it. So then they will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked, flogged, and crucified. Why? Because that's what the prophecy said. That's what God had intended to do, to let everybody know, even the ones that were doing the mocking and the bad things physically to Jesus, to let them know that they couldn't help themselves. It had to turn out this way. And he will be resurrected on the 3rd day. There's a lot of research going into how that was supposed to occur, and when he was going to come be given that glorious crown and all that. But he was just simply saying, you know what? All this is going to take place, and then I'm going to go away, but I'm going to conquer death. No one's going to have authority over me. And that brings up the second point right here. When we go and we start serving God, we have to be clear with our intentions to the Lord, because he's going to sift them out. He's going to recognize, I guess you call it authenticity. He's gonna be able to recognize whether or not we're truthful and honest with our service. And that's what the mother and then the sons are showcasing in this little exchange here. It says that the mother of Zebedee's son approached him with her sons. She knelt down to ask him for something. What do you want? Because he's exercising authority. He's trying to be an example of whatever you come to the Lord for and ask for in his name, he will give it to you. But we see here an example of going to the Lord with ulterior motives. Maybe having that facade that you're doing good, but really deep down in your heart, you want something else. He says, what do you want? He asked her. Promise. And she was honest with him. She said, promise. She said to him that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right and the other on your left in your kingdom. That's a lot. That's a lot to ask for. That is probably more than Definitely what I've asked for of God anytime that I can remember, right? To claim the closest spot when he's crowned king next to the king, right? I want this one and I want this one. And not so much I want it for my sons. But there's an ulterior motive there. It's not to serve God. It's to serve so that I can get a spot in line. And we should never treat our service like that. We shouldn't expect reward. That's what Paul, that's what James and a few other writers, and you can see it even in the Old Testament when they're doing what they can. It's never for themselves or people around them that they love. It's for the service of the Lord. You see, and once we recognize that, once we're actually serving the Lord, then he takes care of those things around us. And that might be our family, our friends, our relatives, our pets, our community, all those type of things. Our house. If we're serving the Lord and we're doing what we're told to do, in return, not because of what we're doing, but because we love God, we might get blessed with a repair, some money to take care of some items, some time with some friends, some special time with relatives we don't ever get that time with, right? Because we're doing what we're told to do. He blesses us in those ways, and we don't necessarily recognize it like that right then and there. But once we think about it, you know what? Yeah, because I took care of those things a long time ago, and I did what God called me to do. I'm able to do more. I'm able to fellowship more. I'm able to maybe do a better job because I worked on these things. And that's what he's talking about. Zebedee's, or the sons, they're not going to be given something because somebody asked it for just to have the spot. And that's what he says later on. He says, it's not mine to give like that, but even still, we don't need to expect it. We're working towards serving the Lord because we love him, not because we're going to get something in return. So, but Jesus answered, you don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I'm about to drink? And he's talking about what he just talked about predicting his death. He said, are you going to be able to do that? Are you going to be able to take on the entire world's sin debt and be able to cast yourself aside? Because if he was selfish in any part of that, he would have left. He wouldn't have been part of that. If he knew what was good for him, he would have been gone. But he knew what was good for humanity. He knew what God had called him to do, and that's what the mission he needed to complete. And he completed it without anger, without remorse or anything, because it had to be done. And they said to him, we are able. I don't, one of my good brothers here says that he's able to produce a steak better than one of a famous statewide, almost nationwide steakhouse. Yeah. Famous steakhouse. I said almost. I bet you there are people that would give it more time than some places in Phoenix. Hey, no. Here's the point. Why would that be a claim that you could make, or Clicks could make? Oh man, I said the name. Name dropping. I know. Dang. I'm gonna get this YouTube taken down.
Why can I make that claim?
Yeah, why can you make that claim, or why can Clicks make that claim?
I can make the claim because I have faith.
It's good to have faith, but okay, when we're talking about that and you're thinking more theocratically, is that the word? Yeah. No one can see faith, but they can see the works of it. So how would you be able to make that claim and prove it to somebody? And this goes for everybody here. What he's trying to teach right here is this exact same illustration.
One way that I could do that is, I guess, by having faith in the one that's judging me. Because I can make my steak and they can make their steak. But really what's going to determine it is whoever tries it, their opinion, their judgment of it, right? So I can have faith that because my wife likes my steaks, or because you guys like my steaks, I make better steaks, and I like my steaks. But what's really going to determine it is whoever is the person that's going to judge. That's who determines whether my claim is true or not. And their claim that they can do what Jesus is about to do, they may be where I'm at, but Jesus is the one that has the authority to make that judgment call and let him know what he's about to let him know. So I guess my claim is built on faith, but the only determining factor is who's going to eat the steak and decide on whether it is or it isn't. Who has the authority?
Consistency. Were these 12 disciples consistent in their walk with the Lord? Their physical walk with the Lord? If you guys have ever watched The Chosen, you can see the disciples fall short. Not every episode, but one of them is always in a struggle. And that's the same that rings true today. Every one of us are in some little struggle every day in and day out. Consistency is key in trying to not only show the world, we don't want to show the world. We don't, that's not our goal. We want to show the Lord that we're true and that we're faithful. And that we're going to stick to that while we're going to obey. Going back to what he was talking about predicting and telling how this is going to lay out and everything. Obey, obedience. Being true, being faithful and consistent day in and day out with that service. It says, we are able. Just like a brother was saying here, it's up to the judge whether or not your steak is as good as the other steak. It's up to the judge, and they might be partial. You could blindfold them and do all kinds of stuff. Put pepper in their nose and all that stuff. You could make sure that it's as level playing field as can be. Whether or not he's practiced, whether or not they've practiced, they're consistent. They got a leg up on him. They have a grill that's been in service for like 60 years. Same grill. That's the point. Your faith has to be that same faith day in and day out. Has to be progressing. Me and my son were talking a little bit about it earlier. Is how do you know that you're better than you were yesterday? And we were talking about a certain sport. We were talking about a certain game. So how do you know that you're better than you were yesterday? How do you know that you're progressing? Because that's the one. To me, that's the one idea that you should try to prove to yourself every so often. Do a checkup. Am I better than I was yesterday? And what can I do to improve tomorrow? How can I prove that? How can I prove that I'm better than yesterday? And how can I prove that what I've done today will progress me, will improve on whatever I'm trying to do? So you have to be aware of those things. And that's what he was talking about right there. It says, you will indeed drink my cup. You will be tested. You will have an opportunity to prove whether or not your faith is strong, whether it has progressed or sometimes regressed. So, but to sit at my right hand, to sit at my right and left is not mine to give. Instead, it belongs to those for whom it is prepared by my Father. There's an order to these things. And it's already been laid out because we've already been tested and we failed. That's why we have to have the perfect one. That's why when we show up, I was talking about it on Sunday. When we show up, was it Sunday? No, it wasn't Sunday. When we show up in that judgment spot and we bring ourselves and only ourselves, we fail. We bring that one who was sent to die for us, that perfect one, that perfect sacrifice, and we put him and we put our faith in him, that God sent him to die for my sin debt. We're okay. We get to spend that eternity in heaven, just as he promised. It says, but Jesus called over him and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles dominate them, and the men of high positions exercise power over them. It must not be like that among you. And this is what he's talking about, bringing this all full circle. Obedience. It's one thing to say, yes, I'll do that and go do it about your merry way, but to do it God's way. So you know that the rulers of the Gentiles dominated them. That if you notice, God does not dominate over us. He has a loving compassion. He has judgment, and he's the only true judge. He's the only one that actually knows right from wrong. So you can't skirt your way around it. But he doesn't dominate over. He doesn't exercise that authority that we recognize as power and being a ruler, right? Dictatorship over countries, right? You don't. We know that as humans. God doesn't exhibit that. So it must not be like that among you. On the contrary, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And see, going back to what the mother was asking for the sons, she wasn't asking that they be served, that they be a servant to anybody. She was asking that they be placed higher than everybody else just because she asked it, she requested it. And that's why people, when he was talking about being indignant, the other ones, they looked at him like, well, why do I think he's better than us? On the contrary, whoever wants to become great amongst you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. And that's really, really hard to understand unless you're going through trial and tribulation. Who do you care about most? Who do you care about first? I know as a father, you put your family ahead of you. In dangerous situations or tough times or anything like that, you want to put them ahead of you and make sure they're safe and secure. It's probably like that for a lot of other different groups, right? Hopefully leaders are worried about their congregations or their constituents or whatever. But more oftentimes than not, some of those leaders, they're out the door first to the safe spot, to the hidey hole. Whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. They should be exercising love and compassion to be able to get them everybody to their safe spot. Just as a worker bee, we don't use the term slave a whole lot in this PC world, but those that work and serve in a capacity to help make everybody better, they should be doing that. The leaders, the ones who think that they're ahead of everybody else, should be working just as hard to make sure that occurs. It says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. In his whole ministry, he was healing, he was performing miracles, he was making a change. He was showing everybody firsthand what was about to occur. But did they see it like that? Especially the religious elite? What were they scared of? Scared of him getting power, him starting a war. He didn't have anything about that. Now, those that followed him took it a little bit further and they started wars in his name. But what happened? Those fizzled out. They didn't come. They weren't anything. Probably because they didn't have God in them. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Again, we know the history, what he was talking about beforehand, what it really means to serve. Selfless. He gave himself up on the cross to die, to shed blood for you and I, so that we may have that. We may be able to claim that promise of everlasting life as long as we're serving God. And so I was thinking about these verses earlier and what it means to be of service. not just to our communities and to our families and our loved ones, but also to the church and to God, and to try to do better. And that was the other thing too. What does it mean to be? What does it mean to be better? Well, you want to improve on life skills, not to be raised above other people. That's not what a converted person should look for. They should look how they could serve and help those around them. So, any comments? Any questions? Rude remarks? No? We'll get some rude remarks online. All right. Well, we're going to be done here online. So if you guys are tuned in, we're going to be back here in church Sunday at 11. You want to join us for a light breakfast beforehand? We encourage you. We'll have fellowship. But we'll be back. And then you can listen to us on the radio, 1600 AM KUSH here in the local Cushing area, or on the TuneIn app, the same radio station, 1600 AM KUSH. So until next time, we'll see y'all later.